Rena had always believed that a quiet life was a good life. She grew up watching her parents work hard and respect each other, and she carried that image into her own marriage. When she married a man, she thought she had found someone dependable and steady. They lived in a modest apartment, not too big and not too small, but it felt like home to her. Rena managed the house with care, waking early each day, planning meals, and doing small freelance work on her laptop whenever she could. She liked earning something of her own, even if it was not much, because it made her feel independent and proud. A man worked in sales and often talked about his connections and future plans. In the early years, he praised Rena for her patience and kindness. He told people she was the reason his life felt organized. Rena trusted him completely and never questioned his decisions. She believed that marriage meant standing together even when things felt uncertain. To her, trust was not something that needed proof every day. It was simply there, like air. Slowly, small changes began to appear, so small that Rena barely noticed them at first. A man started commenting on how she dressed, saying some clothes were unnecessary. He asked why she needed to work when he was earning already. His questions sounded reasonable on the surface, and Rena answered calmly, not wanting to create problems. She thought he was just stressed from work. She told herself that every marriage had phases and this one would pass too. Over time, a man's words became sharper. He began checking expenses more closely and asking why money was spent on certain things. Rena explained patiently, showing him receipts and budgets. She felt uncomfortable but believed honesty would solve everything. A man started reminding her that the credit cards were linked to accounts he managed. He said it was easier that way. Rena nodded, even though a quiet unease settled inside her heart. One evening, a man came home much later than usual. Rena had already finished dinner and kept his food warm. When he walked in, he did not smile or ask how her day was. He seemed distracted and confident in a strange way. His phone stayed in his hand, and he placed it face down on the table. Rena noticed this small action and felt something tighten in her chest. She asked gently if everything was all right. A man laughed lightly and told her not to overthink. That night, Rena lay awake long after a man fell asleep. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of traffic outside. She tried to understand why she felt uneasy without a clear reason. There was no clear fight, no loud argument, yet something felt wrong. She reminded herself that trust meant silence sometimes. Still, her heart refused to calm down. A few days later, Rena went to the local market to buy groceries. She picked fresh vegetables and a few household items, moving through the familiar stalls with ease. At the checkout counter, she handed over her credit card like she had done many times before. The shopkeeper swiped it once, then again, and frowned. He tried another machine, then shook his head gently. The payment did not go through. Rena felt embarrassed as people waited behind her. She apologized softly and tried another card, but the result was the same. Her hands began to shake as she paid with the little cash she had in her bag. On the way home, her steps felt heavy. She stopped near a quiet corner and checked her phone. When she opened her banking app, her breath caught in her throat. Every card linked to her account showed no balance. Transactions filled the screen, all done within a short time window. The amounts were large, far more than daily expenses. Rena felt dizzy as she scrolled, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Her first thought was that there had been some mistake or technical issue. She told herself to stay calm and talk to a man. When she reached home, a man was sitting on the sofa, relaxed and watching something on his phone. Rena stood near the door for a moment, gathering courage. She asked him carefully if there was a problem with the accounts. A man looked up slowly, his expression calm and almost amused. He did not act surprised. He simply put his phone aside and told her to sit down. He explained that he had moved the money for important reasons. His voice was steady, as if he were discussing something ordinary. Rena asked what reasons could justify emptying her cards without telling her. A man leaned back and crossed his arms. He said that she needed to understand her place and stop asking unnecessary questions. Then a man said something that made the room feel smaller. He told her that there was another woman in his life now. He spoke without hesitation, without guilt. He said this woman understood him better and did not question his choices. He told Rena that she should accept this situation quietly if she wanted stability. He said the money was gone so she would not have the freedom to argue or leave. Rena listened without interrupting. Her ears rang and her chest felt tight, but she kept her face still. She realized that a man was watching her closely, expecting tears or anger. Instead, she stayed silent. That silence confused him, but he mistook it for fear. He believed that taking away her financial access had taken away her strength. Inside Rena, emotions crashed into each other. Shock, sadness, and disbelief mixed together. But beneath them, something else began to grow. It was a feeling she had never allowed herself to feel before. It was the realization that the life she trusted had been built on control rather than respect. She understood that the man in front of her was not the partner she believed him to be. Rena went to the bedroom without saying another word. A man watched her leave, confident that he had won. He believed she would return quietly, ready to accept his terms. Rena sat on the edge of the bed, holding her hands together tightly. She thought about every moment she had ignored, every sign she had explained away. That night, Rena did not sleep. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She saw someone who had been patient for too long and silent when she should have questioned more. For the first time, she did not blame herself. She blamed the lies that had been slowly fed to her. As dawn approached, Rena made a quiet promise to herself. She would not beg, and she would not break in front of a man. She knew she had lost access to money, but she had not lost her mind or her will. A man believed control was power. Rena began to understand that true power came from clarity. In the quiet hours of the morning, as sunlight slowly entered the room, Rena made her first decision. She would observe, learn, and wait. She would let a man believe he had complete control. What he did not realize was that by pushing her to the edge, he had awakened a strength that had been sleeping for years. And once that strength fully rose, nothing would be the same again. The next few days passed in an uneasy silence that felt heavier than any argument. A man moved around the apartment with visible confidence, speaking little and expecting even less response from Rena. He behaved as if the matter was settled, as if control had already sealed her future. Rena observed him quietly, noticing how easily he assumed her silence meant agreement. She continued her daily routine, cooking meals, cleaning the house, and answering him politely when spoken to. On the surface, nothing seemed different, but inside her mind, everything was shifting. Rena spent long hours thinking, replaying conversations and remembering details she once ignored. She realized how often a man had dismissed her opinions and how frequently she had allowed it. Each memory felt like a piece of a puzzle finally falling into place. Instead of feeling weak, she felt alert. She understood that reacting too soon would only give a man what he wanted. So she chose patience, not the kind that accepts defeat, but the kind that waits for the right moment. A man began to test her obedience in small ways. He asked her to cancel plans with friends, saying it was unnecessary now. He told her she no longer needed to work online, claiming it distracted her from her role at home. Rena nodded and agreed, though inside she felt a quiet resistance growing stronger. She stopped mentioning money entirely, even when basic needs came up. A man noticed this and grew more relaxed, believing his strategy had worked. Late one afternoon, Rena visited her neighbor Mira under the excuse of borrowing spices. Mira was kind and observant, someone Rena trusted. Over tea, Rena spoke carefully, sharing only parts of her situation. She did not reveal everything, but enough to express her confusion and worry. Mira listened closely and reminded Rena that silence did not mean surrender. Her words stayed with Rena long after she returned home. Rena also began reconnecting with her freelance work in secret. She used an old email account and worked during early mornings when a man was still asleep. The work was slow at first, but it gave her confidence. Every small payment she received felt like a step toward reclaiming herself. She stored the money safely, not telling anyone. It was not about the amount, but about proving to herself that she was still capable. Meanwhile, a man grew bolder. One evening, he openly spoke about the other woman, comparing her to Rena in a way meant to hurt. He said the other woman admired his strength and never questioned him. Rena listened calmly, her face unreadable. A man felt satisfied, believing he was reminding her of her place. What he did not see was how his words were sharpening her resolve instead of breaking it. Days turned into weeks, and a man's behavior became careless. He stopped hiding phone calls and began leaving the house more often. He believed Rena had nowhere to go and no resources to act. His confidence made him careless with details. Rena noticed names, timings, and habits. She did not confront him. She simply watched and remembered. One morning, Rena received a message from a former client asking if she was available for a long-term project. Her heart raced as she read the details. The work was stable and paid well. She accepted immediately, feeling a surge of hope she had not felt in a long time. She worked carefully, managing deadlines and keeping everything hidden. With each completed task, her confidence returned piece by piece. Rena also began documenting everything. She wrote down dates, conversations, and financial changes in a small notebook she kept hidden. Writing helped her see things clearly. It helped her separate emotion from reality. She no longer questioned whether she was imagining things. The proof was there, written in her own hand. A man noticed subtle changes in her. She seemed calmer, more composed, and less affected by his remarks. At first, this pleased him, but soon it made him uneasy. He asked her once why she seemed so quiet these days. Rena smiled and said she was just tired and adjusting. A man accepted the answer, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. One evening, a man announced that he would be traveling for work for a few days. Rena wished him well without hesitation. As soon as he left, the apartment felt lighter. Rena used the time wisely. She organized her documents, secured her savings, and spoke to Mira again, this time sharing more openly. Mira encouraged her to stay strong and reminded her that control only works when fear exists. During those days alone, Rena reflected deeply on what she wanted. She did not dream of revenge or loud confrontation. She wanted dignity, independence, and peace. She understood that leaving was not just about walking away physically, but about rebuilding herself mentally. She knew the path would not be easy, but for the first time, it felt possible. When a man returned, he sensed a change in the atmosphere. The house was the same, but Rena felt different. She looked at him with calm eyes, no longer filled with confusion or fear. A man dismissed the feeling, convincing himself it was temporary. He believed control once established could not be broken. That night, as a man slept, Rena sat by the window and watched the city lights. She felt a quiet strength settle inside her. She knew she was not ready to act yet, but she was closer than ever. A man thought he had taken away her choices by emptying her credit cards. He did not realize that he had given her clarity instead. Rena closed her notebook and took a deep breath. The path ahead was still unfolding, but she was no longer walking blindly. Every step she took now was intentional. And while a man believed the story was ending in his favor, Rena knew the truth. This was only the beginning of her turning point, and soon, the balance would shift in ways he never expected. Time continued to move forward, but the balance inside the house was slowly changing. A man still believed he was in control, yet small cracks were beginning to appear in his confidence. Rena noticed these changes clearly. She saw how he watched her more closely now, how his tone sometimes shifted from command to suspicion. She did not let this affect her behavior. She remained calm, polite, and distant, giving him nothing to react to. Rena stayed focused on her work, waking early every morning before sunrise. The quiet hours became her safe space. She completed assignments carefully, learning new skills along the way. Each finished task brought a sense of achievement. The money she earned was modest but steady. More importantly, it was hers. She felt stronger with every passing day, not because of money alone, but because she was proving to herself that she could survive without dependence. A man began spending more time away from home. He left earlier and returned later, often distracted and irritated. Sometimes he complained about work, sometimes about people not respecting him enough. Rena listened without comment. She had learned that his anger was often rooted in insecurity. The more independent she became, the more unsettled he felt, though he did not fully understand why. One evening, a man confronted her directly. He asked why she no longer reacted to his words. He said she seemed different, colder. Rena looked at him calmly and said she was simply trying to keep peace. Her tone was gentle but firm. A man felt confused by her response. He expected fear or submission, not composure. That night, he struggled to sleep, while Rena rested peacefully. As weeks passed, Rena expanded her support quietly. She reconnected with an old colleague named Suman, someone she trusted deeply. Over a phone call, Rena shared her situation carefully, choosing her words with thought. Suman listened and offered guidance, reminding Rena of her rights and her value. That conversation strengthened Rena's resolve even more. Rena also began preparing documents quietly. She gathered personal records, work samples, and identification papers. She stored copies safely outside the home. Each step made her feel more secure. She was not rushing. She understood that careful planning was safer than sudden action. A man still believed she had nowhere to go, and Rena intended to keep it that way for now. Meanwhile, a man started facing pressure from outside. His spending increased, and his promises to others began catching up with him. The confidence he once displayed so easily now required effort. Rena noticed his frustration when things did not go his way. She watched as his control over his own life began slipping, even as he tried harder to control hers. One afternoon, a man asked Rena to sign some papers without explaining them clearly. Rena read every page slowly. When she asked questions, a man grew impatient. She calmly refused to sign until she understood fully. This small act surprised him. He raised his voice slightly, but Rena did not react. She placed the papers aside and walked away. That moment marked a clear shift. A man realized she was no longer acting out of fear. That evening, Rena reflected deeply on how far she had come. Just weeks ago, she felt trapped and powerless. Now, she felt aware and prepared. She understood that strength did not need to be loud. It needed to be steady. She reminded herself that leaving was not failure. Staying silent forever would have been. A man attempted to regain control by changing his approach. He tried being kinder, offering small gestures, pretending nothing was wrong. Rena recognized this pattern and did not fall for it. She accepted kindness politely but remained distant. She knew real change required honesty, not convenience. One night, a man accused her of planning something behind his back. His voice carried frustration and fear. Rena met his gaze calmly and said she was only focusing on herself. Her words were simple but powerful. A man felt unsettled. For the first time, he realized that control could be lost quietly, without noise or drama. Rena spent that night writing in her notebook, reflecting on her journey. She wrote about the woman she used to be and the woman she was becoming. She no longer felt shame for trusting someone. She felt proud for learning and growing. Each page reminded her that she had choices. The next morning, Rena received confirmation that her long-term project would continue. The message filled her with relief and confidence. She knew she was ready for the next step. She began looking for small rental spaces quietly, asking questions without commitment. Each inquiry made the future feel more real. A man sensed distance growing between them. His words no longer carried the weight they once did. His silence no longer felt threatening. He tried to remind Rena of what she would lose if she left. Rena listened without argument. She already knew what she would gain. As days passed, the apartment felt less like a prison and more like a waiting room. Rena knew her time there was limited. She was not afraid anymore. Fear had been replaced with clarity. A man mistook her calm for uncertainty, but it was the opposite. She was ready. One quiet evening, Rena stood by the window and watched the sky darken. She felt grounded and sure. She knew the moment to act was approaching. A man believed he still held power over her choices. He did not realize that power had already shifted. Rena closed her notebook and placed it carefully in her bag. Her plan was clear now. She would leave with dignity and strength, not in anger or desperation. The life she was building would not depend on control or fear. And soon, a man would face the truth he had ignored for too long. The silence between them grew deeper that night, but it was no longer heavy for Rena. It was calm, steady, and full of purpose. The next chapter was waiting, and Rena was finally ready to step into it. The morning Rena decided to leave felt different from all the others. There was no fear in her chest, no rush in her movements. She woke before sunrise, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside the window. A man was still asleep, unaware that the control he believed in had already slipped away. Rena moved softly, packing only what she truly needed. Each item she placed in her bag felt like a release, not a loss. She paused for a moment and looked around the apartment. The walls held years of memories, some warm and some painful. She did not feel anger toward the space anymore. It was simply a chapter that had reached its end. Rena reminded herself that strength did not always come with noise or confrontation. Sometimes it came with calm decisions and steady steps. Before leaving, Rena sat at the table and wrote a short note. The words were simple and clear. She did not accuse or explain too much. She stated that she was choosing herself and her peace. She asked a man not to contact her unless it was necessary and respectful. Writing the note felt like closing a door gently instead of slamming it shut. Rena stepped outside as the first light touched the buildings. The air felt fresh, and for the first time in a long while, she felt free. She went straight to the small rented room she had arranged quietly days earlier. It was modest but clean and filled with sunlight. When she placed her bag down, a sense of calm washed over her. This place was hers, chosen by her, earned by her efforts. Later that day, a man returned home and found the apartment unusually quiet. At first, he assumed Rena had gone out. Then he noticed the note on the table. As he read it, confusion turned into disbelief. He called her phone immediately, but it went unanswered. The confidence he once carried began to crumble. He realized too late that silence did not mean submission. A man tried calling again and again over the next few days. When Rena finally responded, her voice was calm and steady. She told him she was safe and asked him to respect her decision. There was no fear in her tone, no hesitation. A man struggled to understand how someone he believed he controlled had walked away so quietly. Meanwhile, Rena focused on rebuilding her life. She threw herself into work, meeting deadlines and earning steady income. Each payment felt like validation, not just financially, but emotionally. She reconnected with friends she had slowly drifted away from. Their support reminded her that she was never truly alone. She began to smile more, laugh more, and breathe more freely. Rena also took time to reflect on herself. She understood now that trusting someone was not a weakness. Ignoring her own voice had been. She forgave herself for staying silent for so long. Healing, she learned, was not about forgetting the past, but about learning from it without carrying its weight forever. A man, on the other hand, faced the consequences of his choices. Without Rena managing the household and quietly supporting him, his life became disorganized. He struggled to maintain the image of control he once valued so deeply. The confidence he showed others began to fade. He realized that power built on fear never lasts. Weeks passed, and Rena grew more comfortable in her new routine. She decorated her small space with plants and soft colors. She cooked meals she enjoyed and worked without someone questioning her time or choices. The peace she felt was something she never wanted to lose again. One evening, Rena received a message from a man apologizing for his actions. He asked for another chance, promising change. Rena read the message carefully and placed her phone aside. She did not feel anger or satisfaction. She felt clarity. She replied politely, thanking him for the apology but making it clear that her decision remained unchanged. She wished him well and closed that chapter fully. That night, Rena stood by her window and watched the city lights glow. She felt proud of herself, not because she had proven someone wrong, but because she had chosen herself when it mattered most. She knew the journey ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew she was capable of facing them. Rena began making plans for the future. She enrolled in an online course to improve her skills and set goals for her career. Each plan felt realistic and achievable. She no longer measured her worth through someone else's approval. Her confidence now came from within. As months passed, Rena's life settled into a rhythm of peace and purpose. She built friendships, focused on her work, and took care of herself. The woman who once stayed silent now spoke clearly and firmly when needed. She had learned that strength did not always roar. Sometimes it simply walked away. Looking back, Rena understood that losing access to money had not taken away her power. It had revealed it. What was meant to break her had instead awakened her. She smiled at the thought, knowing how far she had come. Rena closed her eyes that night with a sense of calm she had never known before. Her story was no longer about control or fear. It was about choice, dignity, and self-respect. And as she drifted into sleep, she knew one thing with certainty. She would never again surrender her voice, her value, or her freedom to anyone.